Hey there friends, and welcome to this stitch tutorial. Today I'm going to be teaching you how to do the Cretan stitch. This one is super fun and can be used in a bunch of different ways actually, and it is also very similar to the feather stitch and the fly stitch, which I imagine you probably already know how to do if you're watching this video, but if not, I would definitely recommend making sure you know how to do those first, because that will make this stitch so much easier. So as I said, there are lots of different ways you can use it, and here are two examples. It's the exact same stitch but used in a slightly different way. So this is just how you do the Cretan stitch normally, but you can also do it to make these super cool textured leaves when you do it much closer together. So I'm going to show you both today, and I'm also going to give you a small sampler pattern with just a couple of shapes on, just so that you can have a go at filling this in for yourself. So in order to do this type of stitch, a bit like the feather stitch, it can be quite helpful to have some guiding lines on the fabric, and we typically need 4 lines. So regardless of what shape you're doing, it helps to follow 4 different lines. So first off, I'm going to show you how to do just the regular Cretan stitch, just to get the idea of the movement of the stitches and how it works. And I should say as well that the feather stitch, we draw these lines, the 4 lines, kind of evenly spaced, but you don't have to for this stitch, and it can look totally different depending on how you do it. I personally prefer it if the 2 lines in the middle are a little bit closer together than the others. And go and check the file section, because I've included a pattern for you with the lines already drawn on, so you don't have to worry about drawing your own. But we're going to model this one by doing 4 lines, and then we're going to model this one by doing a leaf shape, almost a bit like a teardrop shape maybe. I don't know, I'm just sketching it on at the moment, but in that kind of shape you can do this kind of stitch as well to look like that really glorious leaf. So feel free to stitch along with me whilst I show you, or watch it first and get the hang of it before you give this a go yourself, but I definitely recommend giving this one a try because it's such a fun way to do these really lovely textured leaves. So how do we do the Cretan stitch? As I said, it's very, very similar to the feather stitch. So we're bringing our needle up on that very first line, and this one is very similar to the feather stitch, so you might end up kind of doing a bit of a feather stitch as you do this one, but that's completely okay. Typically the Cretan stitch is much closer together here, and these kind of scoops, or what would be like the fly stitch, are kind of much narrower rather than creating the V shape. So you see it's more of like a slight curve rather than a really solid V like we would do for the feather stitch. So we skip over a line and we go down on the 3rd line. So I've come up here, skipping over this line and coming down here, and then we're leaving a nice loop so that we can create our kind of almost like our fly stitch. And as I said, we're not traveling too far here, we're just creating a kind of a scoop. So we're bringing our needle up on the 2nd line now, and when we pull that through, what that's going to do is catch our stitch just like it does for the feather and the fly. And then we're doing the same thing again. So now we're skipping over the middle line and we're coming up on the 3rd line. Obviously this is the 4th, but we're now starting here, skipping one, going down on this line over this side here. And we are travelling down ever so slightly, but not by very much. And then once again, coming back up on the line in the middle that we skipped over. And again, I'm not coming up down here, this would be more like the feather stitch. I'm coming up very close to where we went down before. And now we do the same thing again, and again I'm coming up quite close over on the very first line, leaving a loop, and then I'm coming up on the 2nd line. Once again, I'm not coming up all the way down here, I'm going very close so that we're not creating too much of that V kind of shape. And then skip a line, come up on the end one, come back up in the middle. Honestly, this stitch in this form is very, very similar to the feather stitch. To be honest, the only difference is that it's closer together and it's not as much of a V as the feather stitch would be. There is not a great deal of difference to it other than that. The real difference for this stitch is when we do something like a leaf. So I will show you that afterwards. But so we're just continuing on that process as we move ourselves down this shape. Again, trying not to leave like large gaps. I'm also trying to leave like an even gap so that the stitch length is even. But as you're practicing, feel free to not worry about that too much and just get used to the kind of flow of the stitch. So this is probably my last one now. And then to finish that off, I'm just going to bring my needle down on the second line here, just to make sure we're pinning that stitch in place and kind of finishing it off similar to how we started. So that is the Cretan stitch. Very, very similar to the feather stitch, just much more kind of like squished and bunched up. And usually it's a bit, the overlap in the middle is a bit closer together rather than kind of even lines. If you watched the feather stitch just before this one, or if you haven't seen it yet, if you now watch that video, you'll understand that it's very, very similar, but these lines being closer together in the middle just gives it that kind of slightly different appearance, as well as it being more bunched up. So feel free to give that another practice until you've got that nailed. But we're going to do a very similar approach in this kind of teardrop shape to create a really gorgeous textured filled in leaf. So I'm going to go ahead and tie my thread and I will catch up with you in just a second. Right then, so to do our leaf shape for this, once again we're going to want to do 4 lines. So our outer line of the leaf is already 1 line, and this will be the last line. So all we need to do is draw 2 lines in the middle. And as I said, I like to make these two relatively close together. So I'm going to draw them something like this. And again, you can see that they're not straight lines anymore, they're kind of curved. Kind of moving in motion with the leaf, they don't have to be dead straight. So I will draw these lines on your pattern so that you don't have to draw them, but just so you understand the concept that this is line 1, this is now line 2, line 3, and line 4. So this does work in a very, very similar way. Essentially we're kind of starting at this kind of point rather than at this point, purely because I find it easier to do it that way. But we're still moving between wherever we come up, we skip one and then go down on the next one. So it's so much easier to show you, so let's do so. Now I'm going to bring the needle up at the tip of where I want the leaf to be. So theoretically, this is at all points. You know, it's at line 1, line 2, line 3, and line 4, all meet at this point. So I'm going to bring the needle up there. But what I'm going to do is act like this is actually line number 2, so that I can skip this one and come up on this outer line here. So I'm now going to put my needle down about, it's only a couple of millimeters away. You can probably see there on the camera, it's pretty close to it, but not right next to it. And I'm going to pull that through. And this has got the effect of us coming up on line 2, skipping over line 3, and coming down on line 4. And then we're going to bring our needle up on line 3. But I'm actually bringing the needle up kind of very near the top, because what I'm just going to kind of put my needle there, but what this is doing is creating this kind of top shape of the leaf. It's just making sure that it's nice and filled in at the top so that we don't have loads of open gaps like we would here. So I'm going to bring that through. Thread's not playing ball there. Just going to smooth out my threads quickly. So you can kind of see the shape we've got here. We've got the kind of the scoop and the thread coming up to kind of anchor that in place in the same way that we've got here. So now we're going to do what we did over here. We're going to now come up on line 1. And again, because I want the top of this leaf to be very filled and I want these stitches to be super close together, I'm coming down pretty much next to that very first stitch we've done, but over on the left hand side this time. And once again, I'm going to bring the needle up on now line 2, the one that we just skipped over. Oh, my thread is not playing ball. Sometimes DMC thread does just have a mind of its own and does not pull through nicely together. If this ever happens and you kind of hear that kind of like popping of the thread as you're pulling it through the fabric, it's usually because maybe one strand of what you're using has kind of come away from the others and is kind of pulling through at a different time. So like this, you can probably maybe see. You can see one strand has just come a little bit loose, so I'm just kind of teasing that out and putting it all the way down to the end of the thread so that they're now sitting next to each other where they should be. Anyway, where were we? So we've done our first scoop, we've just done our second scoop, so now we are on line 2. So once again, we're going to skip a line and come up over on line 4. And again, I'm coming up super close to where I went down last time, because I want these stitches to be really close together. If you leave too big of a gap, you're going to end up with very open stitches, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, it will just look more like this one, whereas we want to fill the shape in. So I'm bringing the needle down really close to where we came down last time. And once again, coming up on the line that we've just skipped over, very, very close to where we went down last time. And then we're just repeating. So now we're on line 3. I'm going to miss line 2, go down on line 1, pull that through and leave a loop, come up on the line that we skipped over, super close to the last set of stitches, pull that nice and tight. Now we're on line 2, skip 3, go down on 4, So as you can see, we're already starting to really fill in the top section of the leaf with this really beautiful layered kind of texture. And you can probably also see that it is kind of a long process, especially when we're doing those stitches so close to each other. So I'm just going to go ahead and speed this up slightly. Not too much so that you can still see what I'm doing, but enough so that you're not sat here for half an hour watching me stitch. But yeah, we are just repeating that process of skipping a line, coming up on that line, and so on. So I'll go ahead and speed up. So I'm just jumping back in now because I'm just coming to the end. So I just want to show you how we've kind of finished this off. So once you've done your kind of, I would say that's the last one on that side because I'm now meeting the line I've drawn. I've got room for one more here. So I'm just going to bring the needle down here. Come up here. You can probably tell that through that my thread just wasn't playing ball very much there. And then we just want to pin that down kind of over on that second line because we're now on the third line. A bit like we did here, we finished on the third line, we went down on the line before it. So I'm just going to pop the needle down here, and that's just going to secure that final loop in place and continue the pattern that we created with the stitching. And that, my friends, is how we fill in a lovely leaf with that really gorgeous Cretan stitch. And it just creates so much bold texture. I love it so much. I think it's just such a fun way to fill in if you have any like large leaves on a pattern, or to be honest, any large space that you have to fill. Doing these stitches really close together just creates that really gorgeous texture. And I'm so excited to see you try this and see how you get on with it. Do give it a go and let us know in the community if it's something that you plan to use in the future, and I hope to see it in a future monthly challenge. See you later!